Welcome to session 3 of the Excel for Data Science series. In this session, we will cover everything you need to know about using Formulae in Excel. If you've never used any Formulae or have used some basic Formulae but don't know how to extend them over a range by freezing elements, evaluate and rectify errors, change their refresh method, etc., then this video is for you. Before we move forward, if you have not seen the first two videos in the Excel for Data Science series, I would recommend you quickly go through them by clicking on the respective links in the top right hand corner of the video now, and then come back to this video. Going through session 2 is especially recommended as you will learn how to very quickly navigate through data in an Excel workbook, which will significantly increase your speed on Excel. Let's get started with this session. To start entering any formula in Excel, you start with an equal to sign, and as you start typing, Excel recommends all the formulae containing the text you've entered. For example, if I type equal to sum, you see how Excel starts recommending all formulae containing sum in their name. Excel also gives a short description about what this formula does. For example, sum adds all numbers in a given range. SUMIF adds all the cells specified by a given condition or criteria, and so on. Don't worry about these formulae for now. We will cover all the important ones in subsequent sessions. Now, let's understand how these formulae work. These formulae are functions, and values that you enter in these formulae are passed to the function which returns the result. Now don't worry if you don't know what are functions. In simplest of terms, these are sets of code that perform specific actions. When we supply some numbers or data to the function, it performs the action that it is meant for on that data and returns a value. For example, the sum function adds up all the data passed to it. Just remember to pass your data within a pair of circular brackets. That is all you need to know about functions in general for now. Now, let's select the sum function by pressing the tab key and enter some data to see the result. You see how Excel also prompts the format in which it expects the data. In this case, it is a comma-separated set of numbers. You also see that the second and subsequent elements are enclosed within a pair of square brackets. Now, what does that mean? It means that all the elements that are within a pair of square brackets are optional elements, and even if you don't enter them, the formula will continue to work. Let's press enter and see the result. Let's type the sum formula one more time and check out what are optional and compulsory elements. All the elements that are not within a pair of square brackets are compulsory, and if you don't enter them, the formula will give an error. Just like this. So let's enter one number and see if the formula works. Now, let's say we want to calculate the total cost, which is nothing but the product of quantity and unit price. We can go ahead and multiply the values in columns G and H to get the total cost. Now, if I want to calculate the total cost in the second row as well, I can either rewrite the formula or I can reuse the formula that I've written above. Excel provides us the option to drag or reuse the formulae that you've already written. For this, let's go ahead and copy the formula that we've written on top and just paste it in the next row. If you inspect now, you will see that the formula that we had written was G2 into H2, but on copying and pasting it below, it has become G3 into H3. This is called as dragging or extending the formulae that you've already written, and every row you copy the formula into increases the row reference by 1. Let's quickly take a look how. I've again copied and pasted the formula, and now the reference has become G4 into H4. Many a times we write a formula in a single cell that we need to extend to all the rows in a particular column. For this, we can either copy the formula and paste it in all the subsequent rows, just like this, or we can extend it by double clicking the left mouse button on the bottom right hand corner of the cell which contains the formula that we want to extend. Let me show you how. For this, I'll delete the formulae from the cells in which I've just copied and pasted the formulae. Now, let's scroll back up to the last cell which contains the formula that we want to extend. Once this cell is selected, move your mouse cursor to the bottom right corner of the cell until your cursor turns into a plus sign just like this. Now, just double click your left mouse button and see how the formula in this cell gets extended to all the rows that contain data. Now, if we inspect each row across which the formula has been dragged, we can see how the row reference has been updated on each row. For this, you can just take a look at the formula bar, or you can press F2 to see which are the cells that this formula is referencing to. Press Escape to deactivate the cell once you've inspected the formula. Like dragging a formula down updates your row references but keeps your column references unchanged. In the same way, dragging a formula to the right or to the left updates your column references while keeping your row references unchanged. Let's see how. Now, let's say I want to calculate what is the total quantity of items that has been shipped to my customer. For this, I will scroll to the top and calculate the total quantity shipped. For this, I will take a sum of all my data in column G, which states the quantity. Now, I also want to get a total of column I to see what is the total cost that I have expensed my customers. If I drag my formula by one column to the right, then that will get me the total of unit price, which is not the quantity that I want to sum. Hence, I will drag my formula to two columns to the right, and that gives me a sum of the total cost column. By pressing F2, you can activate the cell and see the column which is being referenced by this formula. You can also see the new formula that I've pasted here refers to column I, whereas the formula that I had written was referencing to column G. Hence, you see, by dragging the formula to two columns to the right has changed my column reference by two columns as well. So a quick recap. If you drag your formulae down, your column references remain unchanged while your row references get updated. Whereas if you drag your formulae to the right or to the left, your row references remain unchanged while your column references get updated. That was about dragging or extending formulae. Now, there are some very important use cases that we will come to later, like when using lookup formulae, where we would not want the reference table ranges to change on dragging or extending the formulae. What do we do then? Well, in such cases, we freeze the ranges in the formulae so that they don't change references on being dragged or extended. Let's see a basic example for now on how formulae are frozen, and we can cover this in detail while covering the various lookup formulae in subsequent sessions. There are three use cases of freezing formulae that we will cover now. To illustrate this, let me write the sum formula to calculate the total quantity three more times. To make sure none of my references change, I can copy the formula like this and paste it in subsequent cells. Now, let's drag down the formula from the first cell by one row and also drag the entire selection to the right by one column. Let's inspect the formulae in the cell where the formula has now been dragged to. Let's press F2. You see the selection has moved down by one row here, and the overall selection has also moved to one row beyond the range where we had initially put our formula. If I don't want this shift to happen with dragging of formulae, I would have to go and freeze the range before extending the formula. To do this, I would select the range over here and press F4 once. You see that adds these dollar signs before my column and row references, which indicates that the columns and rows have now been frozen, and on extending or dragging the formula, they will not change. Let's check that out. Let's drag this formula down by one row to see what is the new range that is being referenced by the dragged formula. You see, the ranges have not been changed on dragging down the formula now. Next, let's inspect the formulae that we obtained by dragging the formula to the right to column L. Here, the reference column has changed from column G to column H, but the rows continue to remain the same. And that's because we just dragged the formula to the right, which has changed the column references, but since we did not drag the formula down or up, the row references have remained unchanged. Let's also inspect the formula in the cell below. This formula has been generated by dragging the initial formula to the right and to one row below. Hence, that is how the column and row reference has also shifted. Now, let's say that we did not want to change the row or column reference of the initial formula. So, we froze the entire range and then drag this formula to the right and down. Now you notice that the same number has repeated in all my cells where the formula has been extended, and that's because after freezing the formula, when we extend it, none of my references got updated. Now the second and third case of formula freezing is quite straightforward. Over here, instead of freezing both your column and row references, you could freeze either only the column reference or only the row reference. If you freeze only the column reference, then when you drag your formula to the right or to the left, your column references will not change. But when you drag your formula down or up, your row references would end up changing. Likewise, if you freeze your row references, then even if you drag your formula down or up, your row reference would not change. But if you would drag your formula to the right or left, then your column references would end up changing. Let's try these two cases in the formulae we've copied and pasted below. Over here, I will only freeze my row references and leave my column references unfrozen. For this, I will press F4 twice. Now, let's go ahead and drag this formula one cell below and also one cell to the right. You will notice that on dragging the formula down, my row references did not change, whereas when I drag the formula to the right, my column references still ended up changing while my row references remained constant. Now, let's just go ahead and freeze the column references by pressing F4 thrice. Now, if we drag this formula to the right and to one cell below, let's see what happens. On dragging the formula to the right, nothing changed because the column references were frozen. Whereas on dragging the formula to one cell below, move the row references down by one row. And that is all there is to freezing of ranges while extending or dragging your formulae. This will become very important when we come to reference or lookup formulae later, and we will cover this concept more in detail then. Let's next look at the Evaluate Formula and Error Checking options in the Formulas tab. For this, let me enter some values and expressions in the sum function. Now, I've also put a 5 divided by 0 here, which evaluates to a division by 0 error. Let's also put these individual expressions and values in individual cells, and let's use the sum function on them. Now, let's select the cell with the error in it and click on Evaluate Formula. What this does is it evaluates each expression one by one on clicking Evaluate each time. Now you see the second expression within the sum formula has evaluated into a division by 0 error, and hence on proceeding further the entire expression evaluates into a division by 0 error. Doing this helps us identify the source of error and hence be able to rectify it. In our case, we can just go ahead and remove this part of the expression which leads to the error. Now, let's select the division by 0 error in this cell and try to evaluate the formula. Over here, there is only a single expression to evaluate and not the multiple expressions that we had earlier. Hence, clicking on the evaluate button directly evaluates the function into the div by 0 error, which is not of much help to trace the source of the error for us. Hence, let's go ahead and close this and click on this down arrow and click on the trace error button. This generates an arrow showing which cell leads to the error in the formula. Now, if we go ahead and rectify this error or just get rid of the formula that's leading to the error gets resolved and the sum function evaluates into the final value. To remove this arrow, just go ahead and click the remove arrows button here. With this, we complete all the basics that you need to know before we start exploring the various Excel formulae. I will put a link to the Excel file used in this session in the description section and will also mention all the shortcuts we've covered there for your reference. Please practice all that we've discussed here and get more comfortable with it before moving on to the next video in the Excel for Data Science series. If you like this detailed tutorial, please do consider giving me a thumbs up. And if you're new here, please subscribe to my channel to get an update when I put up more videos in this tutorial series. Also do check out the description box for links to my other videos and also to get links to my other social media channels if you would like to follow me there. I will see you soon in the next tutorial in the series.